Hi, everybody. Good morning. Hope you're doing well. If you are in this room, hopefully you're here for our Python and well, mostly Gift workshop. If not, I don't know. Stay tuned. I'd like to thank Cora and Caitlin also for helping me put this together. So we'll start with a couple slides. It'll be maybe 15 minutes of just a little intro, and then we'll do some exercises by pairing people up into teams to work on a pseudo Git project. So first, we asked people to do some pre-work. Hopefully you got the email, but was anybody not able to install Git on their computer? Great. Python? And have you sent us your GitHub username so that we can add you as a member to the Sandbox GitHub repository that we will be practicing in today? There is a sound. Perhaps you can hear the echo from the tour that's going on outside. Hopefully you can hear me all right online. If you haven't sent us your GitHub username, you can drop it in the chat now, and we'll add you to the repository. And do we have any Windows users in the room? 2? Great. So you might need to download a Git bash. So Windows 10 and 11 come with this, but you need some sort of terminal or maybe your favorite interface for coding already has one. Do you raise your hand? Are you set? Do you know what
I have Git bash.
Okay. Okay, so just a little introduction to GitHub. It is a platform to host your code remotely that allows for version control and collaboration. Sometimes I like to describe it as just like a shared Google Drive, like multiple people can access the file, but instead of saving something as like file draft version 2, final edit 3, I don't know. I'm sure people have essays back when you were in college saving multiple versions of that. So you could go back to an old version. What GitHub hosts is this code that allows you to go back and go back to those versions in a much cleaner way that's friendly for multiple collaborators. So Git and GitHub are slightly different. So Git is the version control system. It's the language. It's the system that powers the version controlling, where GitHub is a website that is designed to work with this. Okay. So we got a lot of usernames. Caitlin, Crow, you're on that? Okay, great. So a little rundown of what you might see when you visit GitHub. On a typical repository, you're going to see the code. This is, you know, the meat and potatoes of what we're looking at. This is the things you're proud of making, and then there's lots of other components that come along with this. The tests are there to make sure that when you make changes to the code, you didn't unsuspectingly break a bunch of stuff, so you might have a separate testing folder. A README is going to be the landing page. This is going to be the first thing you look at when you look at a new repository to try and get used to what's going on there. You might also see a GitHub folder. This will contain anything related to being on GitHub, such as continuous integration, GitHub Actions, code owners, things like that. And git ignore contains files that you don't need tracked. So an example of this is when you first run a Python script, it'll create a file that stores all the cached information of the various variables. So that way when you rerun the same script, it'll go a little bit faster. But that cache is going to change like every time you run the script, every time one of your collaborators run the script, and it doesn't need to be stored online. Anything that is derivative of something else in your code is not something that you need to track changes on. So an example of that is if your repository is a website, you don't need to store all the HTML, you just need to store the code that generates the HTML. An environment file is also going to be pretty important here. So this specifies what packages are required to run the code in your code. And last two, an init.py. This is an interesting file that tells Python to treat this collection of code as a Python package. So that way you can import it, it can check for the requirements, you can install it, all of this stuff in a init.py file, which can vary in complexity from just simply saying the name and pointing to your requirements file to a lot more information about code owners, authorship, all of that. And lastly, a license. So license information can show you how you can use the code, what you're allowed to do with it. Most people on GitHub that have an open repository are following open source principles and don't have a license that's super restrictive. That could be interesting to know. And just a note, check your email for an invite to the GitHub repository and accept it if you're waiting to join that. So now we're going to set up our local environment to be ready for the day. And so this, we might need to come around and help people in the chat with specific challenges if anyone's having some. But the first thing we're going to do is we are going to fork the repository. So the repository that we're going to be working in today, can be found at github.com, project Pythia, ESDS-GitHub-sandbox. So this is our sandbox we'll be playing for the day. When you navigate here, you'll see at the top right of the screen an option to fork the repository. What forking does is it lets you make your own version of the code that's safe for you to play in. I'll talk more about the specifics of the different components as we get forward, but right now we just want to get you up and running. And then on your local machine, you want to pull it down so it doesn't just exist on the website now. You want it somewhere that you can mess with in the terminal, in the user interface that you are most comfortable playing in. You are going to do a git clone and then a link to the repository, which you can get this code. So once you've forked it, you can then go to the code and hit the down arrow, and there'll be a little button to just copy exactly what this link should look like. I left it in kind of variable form because this is the structure of the link for any repository that you might work on in the future. Raise your hand if you still need more time with this step. Bill, do you need more time online or do you need help?
I haven't got the email link yet.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Aye.
Okay, people are waiting for the email links, okay.
I just dropped my username in the chat,
Mhm.
so I haven't got the email link either.
Okay,
But I just wanted to let you know I dropped my username in the chat to look for it.
yep, thank you.
If folks are still waiting on links for the repository, you should still be able to, since this is a public repository, you should still be able to fork the repository and do most of this tutorial without getting added.
Yeah, you'll need permission to be allowed to make changes to that repository, but you should still be able to fork it and make the copy of the code. So maybe we can multitask?
Could you run through quickly again how to fork the repository? I think some folks were focused on the username part.
Oh, yeah, I wonder if I can share a screen where I walk through doing it instead of this screen, but you're gonna navigate to this link that I will just type in the chat so that people can copy it. Okay, so that should take you, or for the capital H, that should take you to the repository. And when you get there, on the top right corner, you should see this option to create a fork. You'll click the down button, and then you'll create a new repository that exists at github.com/your-username/ESDS GitHub tutorial. And then once you navigate to that site, that it's going to automatically direct you to.
Can you drop the link in the chat again, please?
Yeah. Is everyone in the room in the Zoom call so the chat's actually helpful? Okay, yep. And then you're going to click this code button and copy. There's gonna be a little copy icon. What makes the difference, fork from a clone? So a fork is kind of like when you see a fork in the road and things can branch off into two different directions. This is gonna be confusing because we're also gonna use the word branch, but it's a split, and the fork is the main upstream repository, and then your version going off in another direction. And then a clone is a replica. So you're creating a version of what you have on GitHub locally on your computer so that you can bounce around with it using some better tools that are more friendly to coding and all of that. If you have trouble with that step, we can move forward with the tutorial with people just editing code in the GitHub website, but you're probably not going to do your analysis and your development and your research on the GitHub website. You're probably doing it on Cheyenne, on whatever else that you like to code in. Hope that answered your question. There can be a lot of different terminology that can maybe get confusing, but the heart of it is that there is a safe official version of the code that everyone agrees on. And then there's a versions of it where you want to do your development. People still need more time making a code or forking the repository. Okay. If you do still need more help, just ask in the chat and we'll make sure that we get you caught up. But I'm gonna move forward with this. Okay. The next step is authentication, and so this one is something you pretty much only have to do, I believe, like once when you first set up your GitHub account. It's not something you have to do very frequently, I'll say that. So this will be required for keeping things safe, authentication. There's a couple different resources on what to do for setting up a token here. Let me copy these links into chat.
Yeah, I think for this part, we should probably save it to for the practical portion
Yep.
of this, and then we can help folks walk through it. But the portion that you may need this for is if you're working on the command line. A few years ago, GitHub set things up so that you can't just use your password for your GitHub account. It requires kind of an additional layer or type of authentication. So we do have some instructions for how to do that if you get into the practical portion where you are working at kind of a terminal prompt and want to interact with your repository.
Yeah, thank you, Caitlin. Yeah, so there's a couple different options moving forward on this, and we'll worry about the nitty-gritty of it a little bit once it actually prompts you to do it. The next thing you're gonna have to do is set your upstream repository locally. So I do this with the git push set upstream origin and then the name of your branch, which is going to be main. This is also not necessary. Different people have different preferred workflows. I like to do this once. It's like a set and forget step versus every time you make a push specifying what it is. So what a branch is, just to back up a little bit, when we said there's different forks dividing your code from your team's code, and then branches are how you can divide your own code and different paths that you want to explore from yourself. And it's good practice to create a new branch for like the sub project that you're working on within your repository every time. It just keeps things a little bit safer. It's easier to revert, discard, remember exactly what your task was, or work on two different things at once that you don't want to conflict. Then you're going to create your Conda environment. So this step is important. So once you are inside the directory from your Git clone, so you're gonna have to navigate into there. You're gonna do a conda mcreate -f environment.yaml, and that's gonna prompt you to agree to build a new conda environment with the packages that are specified in this file. And that might take a second for people.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Like I tried to do the git push set upstream origin thing, and it asked me for my username and my password, and then I had to do this authentication thing, which I've been stuck on for a while now. Yeah,
Okay.
well, in my workflow, I've been stuck on it, so I can't even do the first thing without the authentication.
So
I'm stuck authenticating, like with the second step that you were talking about that we
Mhm.
will work on later. I can't even, it's
Yes.
asking me that now.
Okay.
So you should be able to, for now, unfortunately, unless we do the authentication step, you won't be able to set the upstream repository because that requires communicating with GitHub. It basically you're telling, anyway. But you can skip that step for now, and I'd suggest doing that and then just creating your Conda environment.
Are you saying, so I understand what you're saying for this tutorial, but are you also saying that this is something that has been bothering you when you're trying to use GitHub for
That
your
is why
work?
I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Okay.
I'm like very stuck.
We'll,
and I don't understand
one of us will sit with you
Okay.
and set that up in a second.
Thank you.
We're also, that might be a broader question too, and I think that that's I know personally that that was challenging when GitHub made that switch.
Mhm.
So once you get through this too, I'm happy to go through on the screen and kind of walk through what the process looks like and what some options are and resources. Because I
Okay,
think
yeah.
that, I'm guessing that that will be a broader question as well.
Okay, yeah,
Thanks for bringing that up.
we'll tag out. Do we have a show of hands of how, yes?
Well, I have a question. I was trying to do the first one, the push, and I just said branch name, I give it like sandbox one. And said it doesn't match anything, so I guess I must be doing something.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, so here your branch name is main unless you create a new branch upstream to begin with, or, so you're on, just do the same command but with the word main. And then we'll show you how to make a new branch name.
So instead of, I mean, for branch name, just call it main.
Mhm. To show directly the practical, please, I don't know what, you mean by that. mm,
The branch name, which one we have to use?
All right, couldn't make that out, the sound quality is a little echoey, I think. Okay, I know getting through the nitty gritty of the setup can feel a little bit like stop and start a little bit, so thank you for everybody's patience as we try to get everybody. Yeah, so use main, so I'll type the command. Again. But also, again, this is not strictly necessary. Thank you. Okay, so while people's content environments are building, well, once it's built, you're going to activate it. So your terminal is actually gonna spit out this command for you and tell you if you want to actually work in the environment that you just built, this is what you type. So might move on from this slide for a second, but you're gonna do conda activate in the name of the environment. And then, if you wanna make sure that everything works and you prefer to work in a Jupyter lab, you will do the Jupyter lab command. Okay, I understand the conda environment takes a long time, so just monitor your terminal and hit yes when it prompts you, and but I'll move forward with some of the learning content while your machines are working diligently a way to figure all that out. Oh, so in your base, I don't know if you mean that you're in your root directory, so you're gonna do like a CD into ESDS GitHub sandbox. Or if you mean base, as in sometimes your terminal says base in parentheses, and that's referring to the environment, which isn't gonna change until you have built and then activated the environment that you're working in. So up here, we have a great terminal cheat sheet that Cora put together. Thank you so much, with some commands that might be useful for you as we move forward today. So if you want to find out where you are, as in where is your base directory, you are going to do PWD. I remember this as print working directory. And then CD for change directory. So what you're going to do is CD, I'll type it again in the chat. So CD So I believe that's correct. Let me back up just to make sure the chat really wants me to capitalize things, so. If you want to find out what's there, you'll do an ls. To update or create a file that doesn't exist yet, you can do a touch. And on the right here, we have the useful git commands. So the git clone, which we have already used. And then you can do a git status, and that'll tell you, hey, your repository is the same as the things you've saved. Or it'll say, hey, these files have changes made to it, and you'll want to do a git add on those files or put them in the git ignore. Git commit, git pull, and git log. So this will make more sense as we're actually practicing, and we'll put this cheat sheet back up here. And there's some other learning resources I'd like to point everyone to. So again, you have the notes, you have the link to these slides, which you can follow these links, but there's some great Project Pythia chapters on GitHub that'll take you through this a lot more slowly. We're trying to just spin you up quickly enough to practice, and there's some other very valuable learning resources from Software Carpentry, GitHub's documentation, Scientific Python lectures, and PyOpenSci. Okay. So when we practice, let me first make clear the different components of GitHub. I know we've already had some questions on this, so let's go through it again. So we have the upstream. This is the main repository, and you're going to make a fork of that repository. And so say maybe the upstream already had 2 commits done to it. We're calling those C1 and C2. When you create a fork, you inherit that same commit history. And then you are going to clone your fork locally to start working, and then you're going to start a new branch. Working on branches is not strictly necessary. It's just a lot safer, especially if you have automatic pulls or any sort of bots helping you out in your work. It's considered best practice, and so we want to show you that way. But then to get your changes, your commits C3 and C4 merged into the upstream code, you are going to author a pull request. And so that means you are going to do a git push of your code back up to your fork up that lives on GitHub, and you're going to click the useful buttons to author a pull request. And we're going to split everybody up into groups so that some of us can work with different people. And we can practice this together in making edits and potentially making edits that conflict with each other. So our goals for the day are to look at GitHub issues, create an issue, maybe read an existing issue, figure out how to assign issues to people. This is helpful for tracking like what you want done on your project or things that you've noticed were done incorrectly. Maybe you found a bug. This is a log of your to-do lists. And then each issue is usually associated with your pull request that actually addresses these changes. And so we're going to show you how to make a pull request, request a review from your partner that you're working with so that they can look through your code and say, this looks good to me. We can approve this. This can be in the main base. This can be something that we save and use for later. Or they'll say, hey, you have a typo here, or I don't really understand why your code's doing this in a very respectful way. Okay, and then the last learning objective to get everyone handled on GitHub is how to handle conflicts. So this is when things go wrong? Well, could go wrong. So an example of this is I edit a file and you edit a file at the same time. Maybe we edit the same line of the same file and we both try to merge those upstream, and GitHub is gonna say, I don't know what you want me to do in this instance. I don't know whose changes you want me to accept, and I can't automatically take both. And so this is gonna require manual intervention at this point, so you're going to, GitHub has come a long way in the last couple of years with their interface to let you just online there, like say which ones you want or if you want both. And so we're gonna manufacture a change, because this is the part where people get scared of GitHub or sometimes delete everything and start over. But we're gonna show you how to handle it. And then if this runs over, if we don't get through all of this, we will still be available on the Slack. I'll be on the Slack like all day, but there's also the specific office hours time, both in the library and on Zoom to work